Hey guys, we're back. Thanks so much for coming back for our next segment. In our last segment, I had dropped a couple of jewels on Chris, sort of laying out how I see brain injury, concussion, TBI working out, both in the private insurance space and the military space. But in the military space, they used to throw a ton of narcotics at this.
Right.
But anyway, my last outro question was, Chris, are you feeling me? And his answer was
Yes, absolutely.
so tell me about, just start free forming on that approach, what works, what doesn't, how you do it different. Just get rolling.
Sure. So, I think probably a good place to start is what is a diagnosis, right? Like you said, we treat a lot of ADD, we treat anxiety, depression, all these cognitive symptoms and what I call neurocognitive symptoms. But all it is it's a label of a set of symptoms. And other than maybe I send somebody to your office and I go, hey, I'm sending you somebody who's got an anxiety disorder versus somebody who's got I don't know, schizophrenia, then you have a loose idea of who's walking through your door. But you don't have an idea of how they got there, right? So when somebody comes in and says they have ADD, we're talking about focus, attention, impulsivity, mind wandering, the list, a very long list. But like a headache, right? Somebody comes into your office and says, I got a headache.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? And then you go, well, all right, so traditional medicine might say, here's a fix, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory for that. And your headache went away and you go, oh, I must have had a headache. And I go, you may have. It doesn't tell us where that headache came from. Doesn't tell us what you got.
Now that's 100% my issue with the medical industrial complex is you are being subscribed or prescribed a label and put in a box for insurance billing.
Right.
And just to put you in a box.
Right.
And it's not fair to the providers because they start putting people in boxes
Right.
that don't fit in that box.
Right.
And it's not fair to the patients either because they start telling themselves, oh, I'm depressed.
Right. Yeah.
I'm a victim to the world.
Label. You got it.
Oh, right. I'm not proactive in the world. It's a disease.
Right.
I'm boxed in now,
Right.
and I can't get out.
So ADD, let's say, is a thing, and I go, no, ADD, as we start to see it now, can be blood sugar. It can be inflammation. It can be learned bad habits. It can be so many different things. Multiple concussions, or D, all of the above.
All of the above.
Right. And, for most people, hormones, yep, you got it. Or sleep deprivation.
And I've even seen papers on regional diabetes in the brain.
Right. So there I go. What do you really have? Do you have ADD or do you
so
have
you've
D,
been
all
given
the above?
this basket. It's like saying somebody has bronchitis. And I'm like, what's that? Viral, inflammatory, bacterial, structural. What does that mean?
Right. How do we get there? Yeah. So to get back to what we were talking about is then to get at, okay, we're sending people around. They have this set of issues and we're not getting at core. And I'm a why guy. I want to know why. I want how we got there.
Yep.
Right. So for me, then it's always been the pursuit of why. And I think what we're stuck with a lot of times in just kind of traditional Western medicine is we're stuck on the surface, and it takes time, energy, and effort to trace somebody's stuff backwards for a while and figure out how they got there, how they landed with these issues. And nobody's going to pay for that. I mean, I should say at least insurance companies aren't going
Well,
to pay
the
for
system is set up reactionarily.
Right.
It's set
You
up
got
to, oh, you're having chest pain. Now we've got to take all the steps to prove it's not a heart attack. But if it's not a heart attack, hit the bricks until you have one.
that. Right.
So I want to just start out, and I'm sure you approach everyone slightly differently, but I was that guy that showed up with the concussion lingering and got referred over. And the first thing we did was a functional EEG, which of course insurance won't pay for that either. Why did you do that?
So QEEG, quantitative EEGs, what you're doing is you're digitizing the analog data, the brain waves. Then we're comparing you to other men your age, so gender, age,
And you have hundreds of thousands of people in a database, right?
There's a lot. I don't even know how big this database. There is, I believe, last conference that I went to, somebody was doing a meta-analysis of 5 or 6 databases. And I don't know what the big numbers were as you added all that up. But they were basically all finding the same thing in the meta-analysis.
Got it.
It was like very clear, right? So I don't know what the grand total is. It's a good size number for research. Like what most people really don't get about research is the number, the n of what, n is in research, the amount of people in the study is typically pretty small. Like a lot of the meds that we take and a lot of the things that we call kind of standard information is based on a very small sample, oftentimes less than 100. Very tiny. So QEEG is using a gender and age matched neurological normative database. And what we're doing is we're comparing the amount of the different types of brainwaves that you make to other men your age. The brain has a lot of electrical wiggle room. You have a ton of electrical wiggle room. Roughly 1.8 standard deviations on either side of what we call normal, right? So normal, whatever that is, 1.8 standard deviations is about 92% of everybody's going to fit between 1.8 standard deviations. So you're really looking for the places where somebody is in the extremes, right? If they are, what areas of the brain is that happening in, these electrical anomalies? What functions do those areas of the brain govern? And then does that start to have anything to explain any of the kinds of symptoms that you're noticing? That's what we did with you. So we did a QEEG.
So what you're saying is that somebody like me or somebody that just got placed in the ADHD basket, you can actually use a real analysis and find out, I know why this is happening. These are the parts of the brain that are telling me you're having dysfunction, and you don't have to see structural abnormality on an imaging.
No, well, okay. So think of it like this. So ADD, here's a great example of why imaging data. I like data. Give me as much as I can, but I like a lot of data, right? So ADD, the way that we look at things, you can have a kiddo who has too much beta or high beta activity. That's fast brain waves in the brain. Beta and high beta, these are the brain waves that we're using for thinking, getting it done, homework, this conversation right now. You can have too much. So picture, for all cars going down the highway at 65 speed limit, let's pretend, your brain can be going 120. That kid behaviorally doing this kind of stuff, and we all know these kids tap, 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 or blurting out these kinds of things, right? To burn that off, okay? Or you can have a kid who does not have enough fast activity. and they'll do the same things
to try to pump up the
bring
jams.
it up.
Yeah.
So we've got this label of ADD, and we've got a set of behaviors that look identical with two very different genesis points in the brain,
Yeah.
which is why we like QEEG. Starts to give us an idea of what we're looking at and what we're dealing with. And I've always gotten annoyed with psychology and psychiatry. It's one of the few healthcare professions that doesn't actually take a look at the thing they're working on, right?
They
Doctors
focus
have
on
x-rays and
yeah.
tests and all these, and we're living in this ether of,
It's 100% subjective.
yeah, right?
Yeah.
So I love that we're in this place now where we're starting to use SPECT scans and QEEGs and MRIs and fMRIs to start getting some understanding of how this thing works and this thing runs.
Got it.
So that's why QEEG.
So what did you find on me?
Well, with
If you can remember.
Yeah. So your QEEG, if I remember right, and you come in, we work your protocol.
Yeah, it was about a year ago.
Yeah, is that you were not making enough brake pedal. We see this a lot in brain injury, is that as the brain injury settles and you've lost some of your functioning, you're running into issues with some of your abilities, oftentimes what's happening is Lee, he's got to practice. He's a busy guy. He's used to going. He's used to doing. He'd like to resume his life. Where's he going to get that energy from? So we learn to tap our adrenals. We learn to hit our internal gas pedal. We can use stress. We can use a variety of situations to activate a system in our body to provide us the energy that we need, but not in a good way, right? And then you can get stuck there. And then, of course, what happens is when you use adrenal's sympathetic nervous system to get you through your day, what you're really doing is you're inhibiting healing.
Yeah.
Right? So then you don't get better.
Can't sleep because you're hyped up.
Can't sleep because you're hyped up. And then there's a great example. Now another layer. You're not sleeping. What happens when you don't sleep? Well, your brain doesn't detox. Your brain doesn't repair itself. Your brain doesn't build more spare parts for tomorrow. Your immune system takes a hit. And you lose memory as well as functioning.
Well, that's amazing. I'd kind of like to maybe keep on going on this in the next segment. But I want to really thank you for the conversation. And guys, thanks so much for showing up. Please join us at the next segment.